I'm a mapping guy. Google probably chose like one of the most expensive ways to go build their map because we were paying people in cash. People weren't passionate about it, right? In the same way, it was kind of like the renter mentality versus the owner mentality, right? And so building the crypto layer such that it will incentivize people properly. It'll kind of align all the economic financial incentives. You know, we don't care what car you're driving. Like you can drive a truck, you can drive, you know, a Tesla, you can drive, you know, a shitty Mazda from like 1995. What we do care about is where you're driving. I mean, doing 11 million transactions on Ethereum would be basically bankrupt the company, right? Bankrupt the entire project. So it's like, why do that? That's stupid. 30,000 users that comes in and like starts contributing on Hivemapper. I would be willing to bet a lot of money that they will never ask me or for that matter, anybody else, what blockchain is this running on?
Today, I'm joined by Ariel. Super excited to have you on the podcast, the founder of Hivemapper. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
I think in general, the decentralized physical infrastructure networks are really coming alive and their story is just now starting to be told. And I think particularly what you're building with Hivemapper has also started to gain a lot of traction, a lot of data. And so really just excited to have the conversation and appreciative of you coming on the podcast. I think this is going to kind of open up a whole new world of crypto applications. And I think you're really one of the pioneers in the space.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, after this podcast, you'll know more about mapping than you probably ever would want to know.
Let's do it. I used to be at Tesla. I was on the supercharger side of things, but all those Tesla cars collected a good amount of map data, and I was kind of nerding out on how they did some of that training. And so I'm sure you can do lots of fancy stuff with Hivemapper as well. But maybe before we dive into Hivemapper specifically, could you just give a little bit of context on who you are and how you got involved in the blockchain and crypto industry?
Yeah. Well, I'm not I guess what you would call a crypto native. I mean, I definitely bought Ethereum like fairly early on and then, you know, just continued to kind of keep track of it. Ethereum was really the first thing that was interesting to me because you can actually build new applications on top of it, whereas Bitcoin never kind of like morphed into that for whatever reason. So Ethereum definitely was like super interesting when it came out, and I just was like tracking it. But I'm a mapping guy, so my first job out of school was at Yahoo, and it was like a fun time to be at Yahoo. This like 2006, 2005 timeframe. And it was fun because we were still very competitive with Google, both in search as well as in map. So I sat within the search group. And, you know, most people don't realize that. So we had like 35% market share. I think Google had like 38, 40, but they were definitely like gaining on us. And it was a big business for us, search. And so, you know, we looked at all of our queries and like roughly 30% of all of our queries had some sort of local or geo dimension or mapping dimension to them, right? So people are searching for restaurants, you know, people searching for directions, people searching for like, what's the population of X? So I started to look after all of our local data, right? And then I kind of took over all the map stuff as well and grew that to like 80% market share. But what then happened was Google started to collect their own data, right? Like everybody in the industry was just kind of licensing data from a whole set of providers. Google started to collect their own data. As they collect their own data, clearly their map got a lot better. They sort of take market share from us. So we went to, at the time, the CEO of Yahoo, and we're like, look, we got to pony up here, right? Like this is serious business. We need to go collect our own data. Like we need $220 million. We came back with like 10 or 15. And it was like, I mean, it's kind of silly. It was like, what are you going to do with 10, 50 million? Like, you know,
classic startup problem.
Yeah. Like map half of California, then call it a day. I mean, the whole thing, like they just weren't really like understanding the scale and, you know, the data operation that would need to happen in order to really compete with Google. So I got frustrated and left Yahoo. But what I did observe was that Google's approach was incredibly expensive, right? There's a lot of different ways you can build a map. Google probably chose like one of the most expensive ways to go build their map. And what that meant was a couple things. That meant was they were not able to update their map as frequently as they ought to. And then the second thing it meant was that there's many parts of the world where it just wasn't, you know, it didn't pencil out, right? Like mapping in South America aggressively, or Africa, or even parts of Asia relative to like how they could monetize, just given how their cost structure is, was really hard, right? And so like if you're a product manager sitting in Mountain View, California, you're like, oh, look, I can spend more money like mapping in London or Los Angeles, and I can see a good ROI versus, Manila or Kuala Lumpur or Lagos, Nigeria, or even, Sao Paulo. It's a lot harder to like rationalize that from a cost perspective. So that's their Achilles heel, right? Is that just the cost is just so incredibly high. But look, fast forward to today, like, even though it's very expensive, they definitely they're the 800-pound gorilla in the market. And nobody like it's not like there's a startup that comes along, I don't know if you're doing like marketing analytics or sales automation, there's like, a new startup that's created every 5 minutes. In maps, it's not like you have, a new startup that is trying to build a map. Waze obviously did it. There's others as well that have, but it's few and far between that are really going for like global scale. And so, and the reason for that is just hard, right? It's like really, really, really hard, and you need capital. But all the pieces of kind of where we're at today with Hivemapper took years to kind of fall into place. And we went down like a lot of blind alleys. So I left and then started another company before Hivemapper called Gigwalk. And it was in the data collection game. So we had like 2 million users all over the world collecting data on behalf of like, actually Google Maps was a customer, Bing Maps was a customer, Bloomberg Financial, and they would collect data. The problem with that business was we did not own the data. And, so the economics of that were not great. I left and then started Hivemapper late 2015, late 2016. We started with drones. So like the idea was like always the same, it was like build a global map of the world. But we started with drones. Drones did not work because the battery technology sucked and it wasn't getting better.
Yeah.
And the second thing was like you had all this like local government regulation that was getting in the way. And so it just made it really tough to like, like, I don't know, the city of Palo Alto has like different than like, the city right next door to it, right? So it's just kind of like crazy. So we put that to the side. But we had built this like mapping engine behind the scenes. We put that to the side, and then we went, for basically street level 3D dash cams. It was not our own dash cam. It was a third-party dash cam. There were a lot of issues with it. And so we decided, hey, we got to go build our own dash cam to like really get the entire pipeline working at the level that we would want, both from a quality perspective in terms of the map, and also from the perspective of, just making it really passive and easy for contributors. So we did that, and let me back up there. We were like, okay, we started that project, but we didn't have enough capital to like go and like fully execute it. And then I saw Helium 2019, I think. I was like, ooh, that's interesting. Because we were paying people in cash, and it wasn't like it was, people weren't really interested. People weren't passionate about it. Right. In the same way. It was kind of like the renter mentality versus the owner mentality. Right. And so, so we basically decided two things. One is we're going to go build a dash cam, and B, we're going to go and build in the crypto layer such that it will incentivize people properly. It'll kind of align all the economic financial incentives. So then we raised $18 million from Multicoin back in like November of 2021.
Amazing. Fascinating story. It is. I mean, map, as you said, it is a challenging problem, and even kind of the self-driving problem has same hardships. It's hard to collect all that data. How, I guess, maybe getting into Hivemapper specifically, could you talk about? I mean, because you have the physical real world infrastructure of that actual dash cam, and there's people actually doing things in the physical world, but you also have kind of this crypto component and mapping engine on the back end. Could you speak specifically to kind of each of those single pieces and then how they all combine together?
Yeah. So it's a big, like massive data engine, right? And it starts with collection of the data. So you buy this dash cam from Hivemapper. It looks and smells like every other dash cam in the world, but it does have specific components inside of it that are critical for mapping, right? So we have to have really high quality GPS or GNSS because if you're not in the right place, then you're not going to build a very good map. It has to have what we refer to as location verification or location security. What that basically means is like we need to trust that you're actually collecting in like Venice, California, and not Sao Paulo or somewhere else. So that's the and then obviously from an imager perspective, it has to have a high quality imager on it so that we can actually see the stuff and then use that high.
Could you share some of the specs of the dash cam?
Sure. I mean, it's all public data. Like, it has a uBlocks. I think it's an M9N component, which is it has that's the GNSS module. It's a very high quality GNSS. So for higher, it's much better than anything you're going to get on an iPhone or Android, as an example. And it also is encrypted, right? And so that basically means is all the GPS coordinates are going to be encrypted. And so it's harder for somebody to spoof their location as a result of that being encrypted. The imager, I forgot which imager, I think we're using a Sony imager. But again, very high quality imager. The other thing is that it's integrated very, very tightly with the app, right? So you basically download the Hivemapper app and it's tightly integrated because what we want is we want to make that data transfer process free, right? We don't want you to have to like go and buy, a data plan for your dash cam. It's like, basically it moves all the data to your phone. When your phone then connects to Wi-Fi, it'll automatically move it up. If you have like an unlimited data plan on your phone, then great, you can use that and it'll automatically upload it as you're driving. So that is all data collection. That's really, really important, right? And I think people underestimate how hard that is to do on a global scale. We don't care what car you're driving. Like you can drive a truck, you can drive, a Tesla, you can drive, a shitty Mazda from like 1995. Ultimately, you can't do this right now, but ultimately, if you're driving a motorcycle, great. So we really don't care like what vehicle you're driving. What we do care about is where you're driving, right? So if you're building Tesla's obviously really popular in places like, Beverly Hills and Santa Monica and Miami, but, not as much in, I don't know, Oklahoma as an example.
True.
And so that's really challenging is like, how do you build a global map? You need that diversity of geographical presence. So all that data ultimately all the imagery data, location data, how fast the car's traveling, all that kind of stuff makes its way up to Hivemapper. And then we start to extract objects out of the imagery. So what does that mean? That means is like, hey, that's a speed limit sign that's 25 miles per hour. That's a one-way street. That the name of the business over here is called Sal's Pizzeria, right? All of that kind of information gets extracted out. And then the community is kind of training the AI that is doing that automated extraction.
And on my ignorance, and maybe for people that have not been in the mapping industry as long as you, what is that valuable component in the map data? Is it just the data itself, or is it specifically kind of these imageries that you're pulling out of those images, or both?
Well, the imagery serves as like, the way to think about it is like the imagery really serves as raw ingredients, right, into the map, right? So, our eyes, a camera is effectively like eyes everywhere. And if you had eyes everywhere, then that would be helpful, right, in terms of collecting that raw data. But somebody then needs to like take all that information out of that imagery to say, okay, this road over here has 2 lanes in each direction. There's a bike lane that goes northbound. There's a speed limit over here that's 35 miles per hour. The right-hand lane over here is a turn right only lane. All of that kind of detailed information. That's ultimately what forms the map, so that you can do things like turn-by-turn navigation, right? So you can do things like, hey, I want to look up Sal's Pizzeria shop and like get directions there, right? I want to look at like if I'm doing a truck delivery, and I'm doing to the back of like Target, right? So I want to see like, okay, am I going to actually be able to fit my truck around, right? Are there any vertical like height clearances? Like all of that detailed information. If you think about, you're taking a trip or you're going to the grocery store or you're going out to a place that you've never been before, like, the map helps you in all these little tiny ways that's quite useful, obviously. And so that's one layer of the map. The second layer of the map is, or I should say a layer above that is kind of what we refer to as traffic and incidents. So this would be more like Waze, right? Like, okay, there was a 3-car crash here. Here's an image of it, by the way, hey, by the way, like, the lanes over here just went from, because there's some construction on the road or some debris on the road, it went from like 3 lanes down to 1 lane, right? And that debris, by the way, is going to take like hours, because like some tree fell into the road or whatever it is. It's going to take hours to like go and fix. It's not going to be like a quick thing, right? So all of that information is ultimately helping inform the map and get people to where they want to go and get people to where they want to go very, very quickly. There's a lot of other use cases for maps. Like weather obviously uses maps, business intelligence uses maps. So there's thousands of different, use cases for maps, but we're very focused on like navigation and logistics.
Gotcha. Very interesting. So there's maybe speak a little bit to why would someone buy these dash cams? What is their kind of incentive and, in your words, kind of that ownership that they weren't getting when you were previously kind of just giving them cash to map these networks? And then ultimately that data that you do collect on the mapping side and the imagery, who are you kind of either selling or working with on your side to kind of make the entire pie kind of come together?
Yeah. Okay, so there's let's start in terms of the customer, right? There are 2 customers for this data. There's business customers. So like Google Maps, for example, is used by like millions of businesses, right? So if you go to Uber, you're using Google Maps. If you go to Yelp, you're using Google Maps. If you go to an insurance company and fill out like an application for car insurance, like they're using Google Maps inside of that form, and they're definitely using Google Maps on the back end, right, in a whole variety of ways. So there are literally millions of businesses. So that's our primary customer base, right? Is like serve those customers. Why? Because they pay for it, right? Like if Pepsi, Pepsi has, I think, 60,000 trucks and vehicles that are doing deliveries every single day all over the world, and they have, let's say, every truck, I'm just making these numbers up, but it's like hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue on every single truck. If that delivery can be done in like 6 hours versus 7 hours, that's real money, right? Yeah. And so they're willing to pay for, much fresher data. They're willing to pay for, much higher quality data, right? That's like very, very detailed, especially to their specific use cases. So that is the market that we're focused on primarily. There's another market, that's many, many billions of dollars of revenue right there. There's another market, which is the consumer. Google Maps monetizes the consumer via ads, via transactions, etc. Again, I don't know, like the latest estimate that I heard is like about $13 to $15 billion a year, right? So not chump change.
No.
So, we will ultimately provide also like a consumer navigation app. It's not the first thing that we're going to go do, but it will be something that will be provided to customers. We're already getting a lot of contributors who are saying, look, I'm contributing with your dash cam. It'll be really awesome to have navigation built in, right? So that will also come, but it will come after all the mapping APIs for businesses. So that's kind of the business. We're not innovating in terms of like, we're not creating a new market, right? In other words, like there are existing customers that spend on this. The really challenging part is twofold. One is, how do you get enough scale, right, for the big customers where the big dollars are? So like a Pepsi or Coca-Cola or FedEx, they operate everywhere.
Yeah.
And so if you show up and you're like, hey, I have a great map of LA, they're like, that's cool. I don't know what to do with that, Yeah. And so, yes, that you got to show these customers that you have the kind of scale that is interesting, that's relevant for them. And then you got to also show them that you can be able to update. And then you got to show them that you have the great tools that they can actually use and integrate with their products. So it is challenging in terms of like, there's multiple hurdles that you have to like step over in order to become relevant to the big customers, right? Where the big dollars are, frankly. Okay. So in terms of the dash, like, okay, contributors, there's two types of contributors. There are people who are out there driving, and they buy this dash cam from us and they drive. Now, here's the important thing, as we don't want people driving. Like, do not quit your job for Hivemapper and drive. Like, that's a bad idea. I mean, you can do whatever you want, quite frankly, but like, I think it's not the way the system was designed.
Yep.
Don't even like, I think it's also a bad idea to like consider Hivemapper like a part-time job. Like, that's not what it's designed to do. It's really designed to say, okay, I drive, right? So I think the kind of the thought process you have to go through is, do I drive? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, this is relevant to me. Do I drive more than 10 minutes a day to the grocery store or to the coffee shop, and I just go to the same two places every single day? Probably not super interesting for you, quite frankly. And so you really have to be like in this camp where you drive and you drive a bunch, right? So obviously like Uber drivers and Lyft drivers and truck drivers, it's going to be an amazing fit for them. But I probably drive, I don't know, like an hour and a half a day, between like going to work and then different meetings throughout the day and all that kind of stuff. So for me, I think it's relevant still. And then there's the other side, which are map editors. Map editors don't need a dash cam. They can just sit behind their computer. And there's a whole kind of bunch of tools that they kind of train the AI systems, right? Like, hey, we think there's a speed limit sign. Tell us whether or not it's a speed limit. And then if so, tell us what the speed limit sign, if it is a speed limit sign, confirm to us that it's 25 miles per hour, right? That kind of stuff.
Okay.
So they earn honey. There's X amount of honey. There's 10 billion honey tokens. There will only ever be 10 billion honey tokens. And, as you help build this map, then you're earning honey tokens. And so if the map becomes really interesting and really valuable to a lot of customers, then, all of our economic incentives are aligned.
Very interesting. No, I love the entire concept. I guess, and ultimately you said, I think it was Helium that inspired some of this crypto component. You weren't super interested in crypto kind of on the early days. You got a little bit excited about Ethereum and smart contracts. But what specifically, I guess, about Helium that sparked your mind to say like, okay, this is actually something interesting that you can do with tokens and the blockchain rails? And how did that kind of inspire you to create Hivemapper and get that token piece in as well?
Well, I'd even go further back than Helium. Like what I definitely saw with things like Waze. So many people know Waze, obviously. Waze is a crowdsourced map. There were two parts of Waze. There's like you download the app, I download the app. We're effectively helping them build the map, right? And then there's another part of Waze where there's like these map editors. And there's 30, according to the Wall Street Journal, there was like 30,000 of them all over the world. They're unpaid, to be clear. There's a tool that they give them, which is very, very tedious to use. They're literally like going into a map and drawing on the map saying like, this is a one-way street. This is a bike lane, like very, very tedious kind of work.
And why do they do this if they're not getting money?
That's a great question. So let me kind of finish and then we kind of get back to that.
Okay.
So they, look, without those people, there's no map. Like there's no Waze, like period. And, they ultimately sold to Google for like, I don't know, 1 billion or 1.3 billion. Investors made out as they should, employees made out as they should. But the people who actually like building the map and all the data got zero. And I looked at that, I was like, that's messed up, like that is totally wrong. And the same thing goes for, by the way, OpenStreetMap today. So OpenStreetMap, there's all these editors that are like going in there and editing the map tediously. And, now OSM data is used by, many very large and wealthy companies for free. They're not doing anything illegal, to be clear. But I just look at that and say, like, that's wrong, right? So why do they do it? Look, there's people who like maps, right? And they enjoy it. It is like if you get into these tools, if you enjoy maps and you like seeing things kind of being placed in order, there is this kind of mental satisfaction that people get from it. Like there are some people who like to clean their house, because it at the end of that moment, it feels very good to have a nice clean house that everything is in order. And so I think there are similarly like people who like to do that because they want to see their neighborhood or their city or their town, look perfect on the map.
Yeah, very interesting. No, I think, that community ownership part, though, plays very well to, I would say, the crypto ethos of community involvement, having community kind of own a share of the pie, so to speak, so that they can also contribute into the upside. And I think what I'm particularly excited about with Hivemapper and what you're building, and even the distributed physical infrastructure that's kind of now blossoming in crypto, is it really aligns all these incentives to do something that's actually useful in the real world. And I think crypto, just because one, whether it's infrastructure or just the applications are not there today, this is actually building something that people derive value from. And so it's really cool to see all these pieces come together.
Yeah. I broadly agree with that. I've also seen where there are some people within some of these communities that get a little bit too religious about some of the aspects of crypto and then forget wait, we're building like a product, right? That product has to be useful to customers.
Yeah.
Right. And so they're so interested in like the DAO and the crypto and the governance. And look, some of these things are important. I don't mean to dismiss them entirely, but like when you spend 99% of your time talking about that and 1% of your time talking about the product that we're ultimately like trying to build here and create that's useful for customers, then in my view, like something's messed up, right?
I fully agree.
And like I told people even within our own community, I was like, look, like the map has to be useful to customers. Like that is the true north here. Like, we could talk about data collection. We could talk about DAOs. We could talk about all this stuff for like, a long time here. And oh, by the way, we could still fail if the map is not useful to customers.
Yeah. No, I just did a podcast yesterday, actually, with a partner from Greylock. And I don't know particularly what it is, but we were speaking to kind of Web 2 founders versus Web 3. And I think in some sense, just because Web 2 people that have traditionally come from these large companies such as yourself maybe have had some skepticism around crypto, or just like what you can actually do with it or the real world use cases. It's been a lot of kind of either younger people, people just coming out of college and almost giving like the middle finger to like the Web 2 world in crypto. And I think one thing that they're forgetting, and that the Web 2 people have really gotten ingrained into them, is that product focus, building something that people actually want to use. Because whether it's on crypto, on AWS, whether it's on Starlink or wherever it may live, like you have to build something useful into that product. And at the end of the day, if that's not solved, everything's shit out of luck.
Yeah, I mean, I think that 100%. Look, I want all of our economic incentives to be aligned, right? And I think a lot of people misinterpret me when I say the following. I would rather see like all this, people being all these DeFi exchanges, tokens, whatever. I think for the first year of a project, I think, and obviously we don't control any of this type of stuff, but I don't think like any of that kind of trading amongst people of these tokens is useful or helpful, right? Like you got to first build the product, right? Yeah. And like, worrying about this and that in terms of all this crypto prices and all this kind of stuff, it just seems like a huge waste of time and energy for everybody involved in the project, right? It's like, I don't know of any product that like comes out of the gate, right? At least in terms of like how you have to go build the data, like in terms of like kind of the stuff that we're building, or for that matter, Helium. Is like it's not useful. It's not useful, day one of launch. It's not like fundamentally useful day 90, right? Like you have to go build the thing, right? Which obviously the community is helping us do. But like I think there's like that part of, and I tell people like if you're here like to get rich quick like that, like you're in the wrong place, like, we're here to build a map first and foremost. And like, if the map is useful, right, to a lot of customers that care about it, then great. Like, it'll be good.
Yeah. To kind of that point, some of the physical infrastructure products that use some crypto rails are not useful in the beginning, and it takes a while to build up that resources to make a product that people want to use. Can you talk about that journey from when you started Hivemapper to kind of getting first people using the dash cams to even more recently, I've seen on Twitter how many miles that you're actually collecting daily, because I think it's a very impressive number.
Yeah. So no, it's a good number for sure. In terms of making it useful, there's a lot of like steps in the process, right? So obviously building that fleet of all these different drivers all over the world, right? That's step one. Then step two is, okay, how do you then, like we were talking about before, how do you then transform all that data into higher value, all the map objects, right? And then how do you package up that data so that customers can actually consume it in a very easy way, right? Those are the tools, those are the map APIs, some of the visualization capabilities, et cetera. So there's really, at a minute, I think about it in terms of collection, processing, and then customer products and tools, right? And you got to do all three of those. Like, if you do two out of the three, then it's like, okay, cool, you have some cool data, but like you haven't made it easy for customers to use. Customers come to your website, they're fumbling around, trying to figure out, how do I buy this thing? How do I use it and integrate it? And it's like, great. So yes, it is a process, that will take, I tell people like, look, Waze was not like useful to a lot of people for many, many, many years, right? But from the time that it launched, at the time that actually like gained, worldwide, traction was years. And so I think that's the journey that we're on here, is like, it will take years. Now, the good part about this is like, when you get to the other side, like we know there's a lot of customers, right? And we know that like a lot of people use maps. And we also know that there's not like, 50 other competitors on the other side of that.
So building that useful map, how, I guess, did you and the team just start sending out dash cams? Were you personally kind of doing some of the driving? How did you get the first couple hundred people? And then how has the progression of the map data and the collection, is it to a point now that you would say it's starting to get useful, or have you already surpassed that and you're working with partners that want more and more data?
Yeah. So on the dashcam side, we opened it up for pre-orders back in April of last year. So we basically said like, here's the dashcam, here's what it looks like, here's the capabilities of it, here's the specs, here's the price. And we got a lot of pre-orders, right? So we were, I guess, lucky in the sense of, it touched a nerve. Definitely a lot of people from the Helium community like had heard about us. And so they're like, oh, this is really cool. And so, yeah, like we definitely had like a ton of pre-orders for that. So that wasn't a challenge for us, I would say. In the second part of your question is like, there are certain regions in the world now that are starting to get above. There's three tiers. There's, from a coverage perspective, if you have less than 50% within a region, so a region would be like DC Metro, right? Or Los Angeles Metro. That's like massive. Los Angeles, I think, is about 120,000 road kilometers. Okay. Manila, to put into context, is only like 20,000, right? So if you get like so if you have at least 50%, then you start to become monetizable. Less than 50%, you're not, like, you don't have anything valuable, quite frankly. So then you can start to like supplement other people's data products, right? 75% is when you start to get like bigger customers, right? Come into the frame, be like, okay, like you got 75%, but the name of the game here is to get to like 99% coverage or better, right? Mm-hmm. Where you are the map for that region. Like, you don't have to go anywhere else. That is obviously like you can't do turn by turn direction, right? Or a lot of these other use cases on like 75% coverage. Like, you need 100% coverage.
Yeah. So, I mean, in kind of this pursuit of like data collection, one thing that you mentioned was Google was kind of taking the most expensive approach. Could you go a little bit to, I mean, I guess how Google has either adapted or not adapted that data strategy approach, and maybe speaking to with Hivemapper and kind of incentivizing the community to build this data network in aggregate. Do you think ultimately the collective sum of these like individual people will ultimately kind of surpass the data collection abilities of Google?
I do. Okay, so every Google Street View car costs like roughly $500,000. Between all the sensors on it, between the car itself, the driver, the gas, the car insurance, like those things add up pretty quickly. So it's a pretty significant investment. Just the positioning technology on those vehicle costs anywhere between $15,000 to $30,000, right? So it is a very expensive car. And so, like let's say downtown San Francisco or downtown LA, they maybe see that every year, every like 12 to 14 months, roughly speaking. If you go like suburban Austin or suburban Chicago, probably every 2 to 3 years. If you then go to like Manila or Lagos or Sao Paulo, if they have coverage, every like 5 to like 7 years. Yeah. There was a road, actually, I tweeted about it, like in Romania, we saw a road and Google hadn't updated it in like 10 years. And like the road had like totally changed. Like it went from like this tiny little road to like, I think like there were 3 lanes now. And like, buildings all over and stuff like that. It was like basically rural when Google saw it. And there's a lot of places like that in the world, right? Like I was looking at Abu Dhabi because like there's a bunch of contributors in Abu Dhabi. And I was like, oh, wow, like Google Street View, like maybe only has like 10% of Abu Dhabi. And like Abu Dhabi is like, very wealthy country or a city, at least to the best of my knowledge. So yeah, I think that we will win because we are just seeing a location that much more frequently. And so this is a little bit of a nuanced point, but because you see, the best way to think about this in terms of sports analogy, we just have a lot more shots on goal, right? Yeah. So we are, in any given location, we're going to see that 25, 50, 100 times more frequently. And so you just get a better sense of what's going on there, right? And if you get a better sense of what's going on there, right, you're not obstructed by lighting or a bus or a big truck or whatever. You're just seeing more of that location, and then you can build a better map. And so, we think that numbers is really important. But also more, maybe just as importantly is doing it at a very, very low cost.
Definitely. And to, I guess, continue kind of some of the exponential growth on the mapping side that you're seeing, is it just getting the dash cam into more people's cars, or is it primarily getting people driving more? What's kind of the missing piece, or not so much the missing piece, but what can kind of accelerate the gas pedal?
So if you look at the map and where we have like the vast majority of coverage right now, it's like the US, Europe, South Korea, and a couple other countries, right? Like Abu Dhabi, whatever. But we don't have a lot of coverage in India yet, right? Or Brazil, or Nigeria is growing for some odd reason. But there's a lot of other like countries in Africa where we don't have a lot of coverage. Why is that? It all comes down to the cost of the dash cam. Mm. The dash cam, and I, even though we haven't made a profit on this program, like people accuse us of like, oh, you guys are like, taking a lot of money off this. We have not made, like, in terms of all the engineering costs that went into that, assembly, manufacturing costs, we have not made a profit on that. That wasn't the intent of it. But it is an expensive dash cam, right? It's like $550. So yes, bringing the price, $550 to put into context, an Uber driver in Brazil, or in Sao Paulo specifically, makes $500 a month. So yes, bringing the cost of the dash cam down is really, really important and critical for us. So
makes sense. So I guess kind of like iPhones or any upgrades over time, just the number of product iterations that you'll do with the dash cam will just bring that price down, allowing more access to more people.
Yeah, 100%. Like I think we'll build one more dash cam, but we're also going to like open this up to other hardware partners to go build their own. And there's already like a couple hardware partners that want to go do that. So,
Amazing.
Helium, definitely scaled, a lot faster by having all these partners build their own dashcam, which was great. Sorry, not their dashcam, their hotspots. So we will do the same thing, right? Which is we will definitely want partners building, their own versions with their own features and capabilities.
Makes a lot of sense. On one thing that the blockchain people do love to debate, and I think I'm guilty of this as well, is kind of the infrastructure side of things. You started out on Solana, but there's numerous kind of different platforms or blockchains to build upon. How ultimately did you go through that product process and evaluating the different options and then settle on Solana?
Look, I'm not religious about this stuff. You and I talked about this briefly before we got on. It's like, I just look at it in terms of, okay, how do I ultimately as an entrepreneur, what are you trying to do? You're trying to de-risk the business, right?
Yeah.
De-risk the project. And so I want to de-risk it to the point where it's like, I'm no longer necessary, right? And so they could be like, hey, Ariel, we're done, with you. Thank you very much. Like you could go away and the project would still be awesome and it would still run and do everything. That's kind of where I want to get this to. And I think that we will get it to that point. So I just look in terms of risk. Do I want to take on the risk of in the case of Ethereum, these massive gas fees, right? And I looked at that and I was like, that's crazy. We won't be able to do half the stuff they want to go do. I think we're 3.5, 4 months in and we're already up to on the blockchain, 11 million transactions.
Well,
I mean, doing 11 million transactions on Ethereum would be basically bankrupt the company, right? Bankrupt the entire project. So it's why do that? That's stupid. Mm-hmm. And so that was my primary motivator. I think it was good. And obviously Anatoly and Raj have been very helpful to us. I think they also get this whole category of DePIN, right? Decentralized physical infrastructure. Render is moving over to Solana. Helium just did. There's some other projects that are also building on Solana as well. So I think they get it. And then the other thing is I know people can they point to Polygon, but if you're a project and then you're doing your rewards in Polygon, to the best of my knowledge, then when somebody actually wants to go to Coinbase or something like that and then use those tokens from your project, there has to be a transfer, right? Mm. So it's pretty complicated, these level 1s and level 2s nonsense, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, maybe Ethereum will solve this problem. I don't know. I don't track this that closely.
I wish more builders had the point of view that you do, because I think it's the most practical one. And I think it's definitely the view that I hold as well, is just building on the chain, any chain that ultimately serves your use case the best and allows you to build the best possible product. And I think today, just because we are early in the entire industry, there's lots of debates, and although they can be entertaining, sometimes they're often talking past each other. We forget about building the actual product and what you can do from the product side. And so it's refreshing to hear that, the practical kind of voice one and just making and trying to create the best possible product experience.
Yeah. Look, for the 30,000th user that comes in and starts contributing on Hivemapper, I would be willing to bet a lot of money that they will never ask me, or for that matter, anybody else, what blockchain is this running on? Yeah. Yeah. They're like an Uber driver or whatever in some location, and they're just interacting with the app, and there's this dash cam, and they don't even know what that means, right? And so I just think it's nobody asks, if you go to Reddit or something like that, do you care if it runs on AWS or Azure or something like that? I don't think you do. Obviously the people at Reddit really care, right? Yeah. And the employees care, and the engineers care, and the CEO cares, because there's a bunch of costs associated with that, right? But the users do not care at all.
Totally agree. Maybe speaking to this entire category of DePIN, what are kind of your thoughts more broadly on some of these other projects and spinning up, or just being involved in this category, in this ecosystem? I guess, where do you see it go long term?
I mean, look, I think it is probably one of the most interesting and exciting parts of crypto right now. I'll say something slightly controversial. I was a little disappointed that A16Z, that they did their crypto report. I don't know if you saw this. It did not include DePIN. It was pretty disappointing. Because I mean, look, like what are those things that are fundamentally useful in the world, right? In terms of the larger economy. Okay, wireless networks, really important, right? Maps, really important. Energy, like really important to people's lives, right? Car insurance, really important to people's lives, right? So there's a whole set of things that you can start to build and deepen that are critical in massive industries in people's lives. And so, like, to me, that is the most interesting thing. Like, I'm not going to shit on like NFTs and art. I think they have a role to play in the world. I mean, people care about art all the time. They have for, thousands upon thousands of years, but, it's a very speculative market. It's not a massive market.
Yeah.
And so sure, it'll have a role to play, but like, it doesn't impact people's lives in any sort of like, very critical day-to-day, practical way is probably the better way to say it. And so that's what interests me about DePIN as a category. Look, I think the people who are like coming in are these kind of pioneers, quite frankly, in helping build these networks. I think if they have patience, right, I think that, many of them will start to just feel like, I didn't fully appreciate this. Like, people feel useful when they're mapping for Hivemapper, right? So yes, they're earning these rewards. So all of our economic incentives are aligned, right? And they're helping build the product. And so as people use the product, right, they'll be compensated for that and stuff like that. But there's another aspect of this, which is like, look, you want to feel a part of something bigger in your life, right? And you want to feel useful, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people now say to me is like, look, if like I'm driving in another car, like my wife's car that is not the dash cam, I feel like I'm missing something out. I don't feel like I'm as useful as I ought to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really powerful like psychological thing. And I think obviously in terms of just, from an economic perspective, why should there only be like one or two maps in the world, right? Why should there only be in the United States, 3 wireless carriers, So I think they introduce competition in a new and different way where the people who are actually building these products, get to then enjoy the economic upside associated with actually building something useful and valuable for customers.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think sometimes, I mean, crypto more broadly is experimenting. Lots of experiments are going to fail, but I think what I am excited about is, again, these real world use case products, things that actually bring value to everybody's lives. And I think having some aspects of crypto is interesting, but it's not that crypto itself is the product. Crypto enables you to create the product to make a better experience, but it's not the product itself. And so from that, just even like flipping that has been very interesting to watch. And I'm very excited about the category as well.
Yeah. I mean, look, the crypto industry as a whole did themselves a disservice, right? Because look, in the Web 2.0 world, and I saw this, in Yahoo search days, and, Google obviously deals with this, every single day. There are a tremendous number of scams, right? There are a tremendous number of like bad actors in the Web 2.0 world. Yeah. But you don't really come across them that often, right? Because Google's, in this case, Google search, when Yahoo search had real market share, we would basically suppress them, right? And so it would be very, very hard. Obviously, there's like email spammers and all that kind of stuff as well, where there's a lot of bad actors. But for the most part, the Web 2 industry like did a fairly good job of suppressing the bad actors. The crypto world industry, for whatever reason, did not do that, right? I mean, look, FTX, like one of the major figures in the Web3 world was a bad actor himself. And so like that has to be the crypto industry absolutely has to like filter that shit out, right? And I'm sure it'll always exist, right? There will always be like a motivation, but you know, you shouldn't be able to find them, right? Like nobody should promote them. Like stop talking about them. Don't promote them. Don't give them any attention. Make sure that they, never show up on, any social media or whatever it is. That's the way you get rid of it, right? And because the industry didn't get rid of it, like now you have people like Gensler. He has a lot of ammunition, right? Because he can point to this bad actor and that bad actor and that bad actor. And the politicians are like, oh, yeah, those are bad, right? I mean, like you and I would say they're bad as well, right? But it's, kind of now we're in this phase of like everyone wants to throw the baby out with the bathwater because of the prior sins of the industry.
Definitely. Speaking, I think it's been a slow trickle, and I think bull markets ultimately help facilitate this, is just bringing new people in. But there's still, I would say, I would like to see more Web 2 engineers, builders, product minds come into the Web 3 world. From you obviously made that jump and now are building something very interesting in this space. What would your advice or kind of words of wisdoms be to Web 2 people that are kind of have the point of view that like Gensler, that crypto is bad and it's just used for frauds? Anything that you could say to maybe clean the slate and advise them to look at the industry differently?
I mean, look, it's hard, but I think that I think it's incumbent upon like projects like Hivemapper and others to demonstrate real utility. Like I'll give you a very specific example, right? A developer that I respect, he's like, okay, let me play around, with Hivemapper and stuff like that. And the thing that really got him interested was he didn't have to like for the API, you could just go and hit our API and it was like instantly like, oh, okay, like I got results back and like that was useful and that's interesting. And, I could like go install this dash cam and like I could start like go help build a map. Like to him, the crypto and the honey rewards was, kind of less interesting. He's a developer, so he was more interested in the utility of it, right? And so I think he had come from this perspective. It was like, oh, it's a bunch of like, crypto people and they like want to over monetize everything way too early. And I think the more projects that can demonstrate easy to use utility, right, very quickly, the better off we're going to be. Right. Like even Twitter, like in the very early days, I mean, it was failing a lot. There was like the fail whale, whatever it is, but you could still sign up for it and use it and get like, see the value. It may not have spoken to you in terms of like how you wanted to use social media. Right. But it was clear that there was something interesting going on there, even at a very, very early phase. And so I think the more that we can demonstrate to, what is the underlying utility here and how easy it is to then go and use that, the better off we're going to be.
I fully agree. I mean, it's been interesting. We're now at that point in the bear market, and just because crypto often or historically has been very cyclical, that people are questioning what is the industry doing? What are the useful products? And when I talk with different investors or LPs, really, there are two things that they're the most excited now is one is stable coins and just stable coin transfers and kind of the innovations around being able to send money globally fairly cheaply, but also the DePIN category as a whole, because they can point to that and say, this is useful. It is doing something in the real world and I can see it. And a lot of the other distributed applications that are being built on blockchains have either struggled or just a little bit too early in their life cycle to kind of see some of that real world adoption, but they can articulate and see the DePIN actually coming alive.
Yeah. I mean, this is maybe a little bit controversial. I think that there's like way too much investor time and money spent on like very low levels of the blockchain, like
on just infrastructure.
Yeah, infrastructure. Yeah, so I think Solana is great. Like Solana has its capital. Like it's a serious project run by serious people. It has a great community of developers around it. Like it will continue to innovate, right? we don't need like 5 other things trying to compete with Solana, right? It just feels like it's just like a waste of time and a waste of money, quite frankly. But I think if you were to look, I haven't done this, maybe you can do this, or somebody you know can do this. It says, look at all the crypto dollars. I think that they would still be focused much more on crypto infrastructure. Basically, like the way I think about it is like crypto for crypto.
Yeah.
And I think that's a mistake. But I'm not an investor, so like maybe they know something that I don't. But like, I have no interest in being an investor either. So like, it's not my game.
Yeah, investors, they're funny. No, I think, I mean, in large part, just because there's actually so few like real world or even like addresses interacting on chain. I mean, even like the more popular things on Ethereum have low 5 million, 10 million lifetime active accounts ever interacting with them. And from the Web 2 world, that's like rounding error for daily active accounts using their products. And so investors are very keen to try new shiny objects and hopefully be early. But no, I fully agree. The real world applications, whether it's built in the physical world or even just adding value in our digital lives, are the things that we should actually progress towards. I guess wrapping up the podcast for 2023, what are you most excited about, either at Hivemapper or for the industry as a whole?
So I'll talk about the thing there's a lot of things that are exciting at Hivemapper for sure. But like the thing that's my little pet project at Hivemapper right now is this thing called Buzz. So what you do, it's kind of like Waze reports, but with images, right? So the idea is like in the app, there's a button, you hit Buzz if you see like a traffic or there's construction or there's like flooding on a road or whatever it is. And so we launched it in like this kind of internal beta, very, very limited set of people. And like, we're starting to see some of the stuff that's coming in, and it's just like mind blowing, right? Like what happens in the world every single day, right? The world is a very, very big place. It's a very messy place. And like, every time somebody hits a buzz, they're kind of like pointing out to us, like, look at this crazy shit, and so like, there's some crazy stuff that you're starting to see there. So I think that's like pretty fascinating, but it's also really helpful as well, right? It's not just like, it's helpful in terms of like, oh, wow, that's a big crash over there, right? I should take another route. It's like, it's not going to get cleared for a while. Oh, wow, that's like a lot of flooding that's happening there, right? Oh, I'm going to like Tahoe to go ski. I can start to like really understand like, what am I going to deal with like on the roads as I get up there, all that kind of stuff. So it's fun, but it's also like useful as well. So that's the thing I'm personally excited about. There's a lot of other stuff that we're doing as well. Look, I think the big challenge for the DePIN category as a whole is that I think it's gotten the attention of a relatively, like if you look at crypto, you go to a big like crypto conference, right? You're going to have a lot of DeFi people there talking, DeFi stuff. You're going to have a lot of gaming and gaming stuff and NFT stuff. Like DePIN is still going to be like a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of that industry, right? Sorry, of that conference. And it doesn't matter. You go to like whatever conference you go to, like the DePIN people are still like maybe 2% or 5%. And so I think the challenge and the opportunity for us is like, how does it become 30%, right? Like it needs to reflect like the broader economy, right? The broader economy, like you look at the wireless industry, you look at the geo mapping industry, you look at the energy industry, those are massive, right? And so it doesn't reflect that. And so I don't know why that is, like what needs to change. But to me, that's like the big challenge and the big exciting opportunity as well, is like kind of either maybe some of those people need to go away, right? Or like, and you need to bring new people in, right? Or you have to change people's minds in terms of like why, things like DePIN are so critical for the future of crypto. Yeah.
I mean, I think in terms of maybe some entertainment value on Twitter is getting API hooked up to the Buzz and just tweeting out every time something interesting happens.
Yeah, exactly.
That would definitely get a lot of attention.
It's funny because I think that's like so much more interesting and so much more relevant and so much more like, just like you said, entertaining than like DeFi, right? Like I go to some of these DeFi conferences and I was like, oh, what do you work on? and somebody, I'm going to like maybe shit on DeFi here a little bit, but like somebody explains to me what they do. And I was like, I understood the words you said, but I actually don't understand like everything.
Yeah.
I'm not a DeFi expert, but I know enough about it to like understand how it works at a broad level. And so then I'm like, wow, like this is nuts. But there's a lot of people who are like that, right? Who are like in that world. And so, yes, like, things like maps and things like Buzz are just like so much more entertaining and easy to understand that like, yeah, that'd be pretty cool if we did that. We should do that.
It would be cool. And then I think the second thing is, just continuing to tell your story. I think it's hard because whether it's kind of the debates on blockchains and L2s or subchains or NFTs, DeFi, everybody's kind of competing for attention. And the hard thing is kind of, it's almost whoever screams the loudest gets the attention. But I think even telling your story in more broad formats like this and being able to share the useful things that are actually happening and creating real world value is what hopefully, I think we both agree will ultimately get bigger presence at conferences. And I think ultimately just allow the category, and even outside of that, the entire blockchain industry to scale to very impressive numbers.
Yeah, no, I think it's bound to happen, right? Because ultimately crypto has to reflect, in terms of time and energy and dollars, has to reflect the broader economy, right? Otherwise, we're just going to become this like niche little, thing off to the side.
True. Well, truly appreciate you coming on the podcast. This was one of the more fun and exciting chats that I've had in a long time. And the fact that it's actually building something in the real world and people are using that and appreciate the value, I think is even more rare in crypto. So thank you for coming on, and thank you for building out Hivemapper.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, man.